Welcome to the Decker Bureau of Community Development webinar training series. This webinar session is intended to provide CDBG award recipients with a brief overview of best practices for file organization of your CDBG project documents, along with helpful tips for preparing for project monitoring events. The Administrative Requirements Chapter, number 2 of the CDBG Implementation Handbook, contains two attachments that can be helpful for keeping your CDBG project files well organized. The Project File Checklist provides guidance for organizing your paper and electronic files, and for possible naming conventions to use. The self-monitoring checklist is a required document that must be completed prior to the monitoring event scheduled for your CDBG project. We recommend familiarizing yourself with these checklists early on in the project performance period. You can begin completing the self-monitoring checklist after you have an executed grant agreement to reduce your workload just prior to the scheduled monitoring event. It's important to remember that the ultimate legal and financial responsibility for meeting all grant requirements lies with the municipality or unit of general local government, often abbreviated as UGLUG, with which the Department of Administration has an executed grant agreement. The UGLUG designates a grant administrator to handle the day-to-day activities pertaining to grants management. This person or team may involve municipal staff and/or a contracted third-party firm that provides professional services. The grant administrator should also become familiar with the following other guidance materials: the signed application, which outlines several of the commitments that the UGLUG agreed to at the time of application submission; the executed grant agreement, which specifies several more program requirements; and the CDBG Implementation Handbook. These documents provide further guidance on how the project files need to be managed. Good documents management and file organization will assist with a smoother monitoring process. The file checklist and the self-monitoring checklist organize the project documents into these general categories as shown above. Several project documents may fall under multiple categories, so you'll need to find an organizational method that works well for you and that can be easily understood by others in the event of handoff to other coworkers and review of the project documents by the Decker Bureau of Community Development staff. Files may be kept in electronic format, paper format, or both electronic and paper formats. However you choose to maintain the CDBG project files, you must ensure that they are readily accessible and easily identifiable. Documents may be requested with little notice, so make sure that you are prepared to find and provide paperwork with minimal turnaround time. This is a screenshot example of how DOA Decker project files are organized electronically. You may notice that this list appears slightly shorter than the list of categories seen on the previous slide. This organizational design example demonstrates that similar or related items can be combined into larger umbrella categories. In this example, the reporting category, shown as folder number 5, contains reports, including the equal opportunity reports, such as the annual and semi-annual Section 3 reports, and the semi-annual MBE-WBE reports. It also contains fair housing documentation and the annual single audit information. Also shown in this example, the labor standards category, seen here as folder number 6, contains the procurement and contracting documentation. The remaining applicable equal opportunity EO documentation, and the labor standards information, which includes wage decisions and payrolls. Good file organization will help ensure a smoother monitoring process. The purpose of project monitoring is to ensure that the UGLUG's various commitments are met. If and when any issues pop up, it is preferable to discover them early on in the course of the project to be able to hopefully resolve the problems before they escalate. Let's briefly review the monitoring process outlined here. Each project will be monitored at least once during the project's performance period. Refer to the executed grant agreement and any applicable amendments for the performance period timeframe. Monitoring events may be performed on-site or remotely as a desktop monitoring. For on-site monitoring events, it is our general preference to conduct the monitoring at the municipality's local offices. The municipality or UGLUG will be notified at least 30 days ahead of the scheduled monitoring date. The notification letter will be accompanied by a self-monitoring checklist attachment. The notification letter will list a due date by which the completed self-monitoring checklist must be received by your assigned Decker project representative. After the initial notification, your assigned Decker project representative will contact you to further discuss logistics and accessibility requirements for the monitoring event. On-site monitoring visits may also include entry and/or exit interviews if staff are available and time permits. Within 30 days of the scheduled project documentation review, the municipality will receive a monitoring results letter. Applicable corrective actions will need to be addressed and/or resolved within the time frame listed in the monitoring results letter. If corrective actions are required, a final monitoring completion letter will be sent to the municipality after all corrective actions have been resolved. Each monitoring event, regardless of whether it is an on-site visit or a desk monitoring, will be followed up with a monitoring letter or report identifying any findings or concerns applicable to the project. A finding represents an issue of non-compliance with CDBG policy or regulatory requirements. A concern represents an issue with documentation or procedure that does not necessarily represent non-compliance with the CDBG policies, implementation manual, or regulations, but that must be addressed to ensure compliance so the item does not rise to a finding at a later date. For any findings or concerns that are listed, the Unit of General Local Government has 30 days to respond to the monitoring report. The UGLUG must address and resolve the findings and concerns, or provide an action plan with a timeline for resolving the issues. If the municipality does not address the findings and concerns in a timely manner, then payment may be withheld, and further action could be taken by DOA for non-performance. It's important to note that the follow-up to the results of the monitoring event are considered part of the municipality's project performance. The municipality has several monitoring obligations that it must meet as listed in the grant agreement. Please refer to Articles 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 18, and 20, along with the Department Policies and Procedures Clause and the Failure to Perform Clause in Attachment F for additional information. The self-monitoring checklist is posted on our website, and it is also an attachment in Chapter 2 of the CDBG Implementation Handbook. Please visit our website for the most up-to-date version of the self-monitoring checklist currently available. We'll now briefly review the self-monitoring checklist and the common issues that our Decker staff encounter when reviewing submitted checklists. The self-monitoring checklist must be signed and dated by the chief elected official, sometimes referred to as the CEO for the municipality, and the completed self-monitoring checklist must be submitted to the assigned Decker project representative by the due date specified in the monitoring notification letter. The self-monitoring checklist is divided into several sections, each with its own topic or heading. For each of the documents listed, you need to indicate whether or not the item is on file with your CDBG project documents. Simply checkmark the yes or no options by typing an X into the appropriate field. For certain projects, some documents are not applicable. In these instances, you can place a check mark or type an X under the N/A column. For certain documents or actions, a date or set of dates may be applicable. Please make sure to fill in the appropriate information where the field is fillable. Please note, if a cell or field appears to be grayed out, then that answer is not considered an applicable response for the document listed. For the example screenshot shown here, you can see that the NA not applicable response options are not appropriate for the signed application and project area map documents, the first two items in the list, as they are required components for all CDBG projects. Depending on when your monitoring event or events are scheduled during the course of the project performance period, certain items or events may not yet pertain to the project, but eventually will. For the example shown here, the Citizen Participation Hearing Number 2 documentation may apply. Where appropriate, mark the field as No, indicating that the listed document is not yet on file, or not applicable to the project at that point in time. If you prefer to get a jump start on completing the self-monitoring checklist, you can begin filling out the information as soon as you have an executed grant agreement. Where appropriate, make sure to update the information as the project performance period progresses. All application documents need to be in the UGLUG's local project file, including follow-up correspondence, email communications, and backup or supporting documentation. If you did not retain a full copy of your signed application submission, please contact your assigned Decker project representative as soon as possible. If you used an income survey to confirm that a national objective would be met for your project, all the related documentation must be retained. This may include more documents than what you submitted with the original signed application. These items tend to be the documents we most often find missing in local project files related to income surveys. Please refer to the Income Survey Guidance online webinar for additional information. The majority of the remaining questions on this self-monitoring checklist continue to follow the now familiar yes, no, not applicable, or date format. A few questions may require a name or number to be entered into applicable fields. With regards to the grant agreement documents, we often find that the UGLUG's project files do not contain the fully signed or executed versions of the award acceptance, the grant agreement, or the subsequent amendments, where applicable. We also tend to find several documents either missing or lacking in the procurement and contracting category. Please make sure to review the recorded labor standards online webinars for more detailed information and guidance. Commonly missing documents include, but are not limited to, the formal potential conflict of interest disclosure mechanisms and records, the bid-related documents, including those bids that were received but were not awarded, the official or formal board or council acceptance of the bids, and any signed lobbying certifications for all contractors involved with the project. As a reminder, if no CDBG funds are used to pay for grant administration and engineering services, the UGLUG must ensure that these services are procured in compliance with the local procurement policy. As a secondary reminder, if CDBG funds are used to pay for grant administration services, the UGLUG must ensure compliance with state and federal procurement requirements. All submitted environmental review record ERR documents and related supporting documentation must be kept on file by the UGLUG or grantee. The environmental desk will return a full, complete packet to you with your approved ER certification letter or letter of concurrence. Make sure to retain this packet of information to ensure that our Decker files match the local project files. Carefully read all questions in the self-monitoring checklist, as guidance on how best to answer the question is often provided. Please contact your assigned Decker project representative if acquisition and/or relocation activities apply to your project. Missing documentation often includes completed checklists above and beyond just this self-monitoring checklist, applicable relocation plans, and supporting documentation proving compliance with the acquisition and relocation regulations. Common equal opportunity documents that we find missing in the CDBG project files include the Affirmative Action Plan. Please note this is not required for CDBG grantees that are local governments, along with the Accessibility Self-Evaluation Checklist, or DSPS, Approval of Accessibility Compliance. Documents that we most commonly find missing or incomplete related to labor standards include photo documentation of the posted construction sign and wage rates, formal designation of the labor standards officer, full copies of the applicable wage decisions, force account letters if applicable to the project, an established system or agreement for transferring all records to the UGLUG for indefinite file retention after the end of the project performance period, apprenticeship paperwork, again if applicable to the project, and proof that all underpayments have been fully resolved. Please note, any underpayments for regular time and overtime recorded here should also be recorded and reported on the Labor Standards Enforcement Reports. Please also note that this self-monitoring checklist and the semi-annual Labor Standards Enforcement Reports should match or at least be of equal or greater value if during the same period to date. We sometimes find no reporting on the Labor Standards Enforcement Reports, but do find items listed on the self-monitoring checklist. It is our recommendation that you use the self-monitoring checklist to record updates on progress with underpayment resolution. In this section of the self-monitoring checklist, we ask that you record all prime and subcontractors working on the CDBG project. We have added more columns here so that you are sure to collect the required information for all contractors. Please specify whether or not the contractor has already started work on the project and whether or not your local project files contain separate sections for each prime and subcontractor. Much of the financial management documentation is reviewed as each CDBG payment request is submitted for review and subsequent approval. Common documents that we find missing from the UGWUG's local project files include bank statements or canceled checks for match expenses and project costs being claimed for CDBG reimbursement. We may require canceled check or other bank records to verify costs with each payment request if Decker already conducted on-site monitoring prior to the first CDBG payment request submission. When completing the self-monitoring checklist information related to reports, you'll need to specify the reporting period or time frame that each report on file covers. The employee self-certification reports applicable to the Economic Development ED and Public Facilities for Economic Development PFED projects are the common documents that are found missing or lacking in the UGWUG CDBG project files. For CDBG planning projects, we find that a final copy of the completed full plan is often missing in the project files, along with the local board or council's official approval or adoption of the plan. This concludes our file organization and monitoring preparation webinar. If you have any questions, please contact your assigned Decker project representative or email us at the general inbox listed here.